Hey everyone, happy Saturday. It's your man again, Diego Ife, but this time it's not an upload of the Boom podcast. I've done a rebrand and henceforth it's now going to be known as the Soul Vu, right? Wordplay, and it's based on the idea of social views commentary, and also the solitary view, aka I will provide unique and nuanced perspectives. And so that's what makes mine the, in quote, solitary view that may stand out or be more distinct. So I just felt that when it comes down to producing the kind of content that I want to, that is a more fitting and appropriate name. So now that I've put that aside, this episode is a contribution to my men's mental health series for November, although the likelihood is I'm going to extend it, and rather than making it November or what have you, you can just make it the whole year round. If there's anything that is particularly important, I will talk about it, and I look forward to everyone's feedback, likes, comments, and so on and so forth. So this episode relates to mastering the emotional self. And why would I say that's important? In the Western world, English speaking Western world that is, you don't have uniform rites of passage, right? So outside of obviously going through the educational system, depending on what path you take, either finding a white collar or blue collar type of role, and of course virginity and your perceptive attraction to the opposite gender, right? In this case obviously men would be women. In case I'm speaking somewhat from my perspective, I can't speak for others that are outside of sort of straight manhood. It'll be inappropriate for me to do so, so I'm going to stick to my lane in that regard. So what comes to mind when I think about emotions? The first thing, just as I said it now, is this. It almost seems like a taboo. There's so many men who are almost, the idea of men and emotion, or men and emotional, in one sentence just blows their head. The head is like on a swivel. And it's like, shit. If they see a guy, for example, who might have an emotional reaction, or should I say hyper emotional reacting to some kind of trigger, trauma, whatever it is, many men will look at that man as less than, and they'll be like, internally, better him than me. You understand? Because they don't like the idea of being found in that position where you might exhibit emotion which you couldn't control, right? And so what that speaks to is the importance for us to really work hard on building out the emotional self. And then even when we've had a succession of tests where we're able to exhibit that maturity, there ain't no room for complacency. We can't control all elements of life, as we know, with the cost of living and the need to adapt, jobs being sort of like rationalized, the structural changes in the economy. I know we've got the onset of the AI, not to sort of digress too much, but we know of the change from the third industrial revolution, which was characterized by the digitalization of society, and obviously the fourth industrial revolution, which really started to gather pace, I would argue, during COVID, and certainly, period thereafter. And we're in that period as we're making that transition. So all of that sense of like uncertainty really speaks to this transition from one set way of doing things to, of course, another, which will become more evident with time. I, again, to close out this discretion, will commit to providing more content that might be helpful for people that are interested in this transition and how they can better position themselves, right? So I'd love to do that. Back to the matter at hand and mastering the emotional self. Why I find it problematic. Don't get me wrong, men should not be hyper emotional. And as I said, even if you feel self-assured, you're good at being stoic, you can't be complacent. Me personally, that's my own conviction, can't be complacent. Okay, because one thing I do know, because you can't predict the future, you're only as good as your last test of not overreacting to some form of provocation. Okay, so for me, like I said, and I don't want to be too repetitive, it is really, really important to avoid complacency. What I will say is people who are men who are very triggered about the idea of the word emotion and men, why it's problematic is because in some cases, men will take on significant risks to be able to get on in society because they're only working with the cards they're dealt. Now, you may find yourself well out of your comfort zone And so you've had some form of setback or adversity which you could never have prepared or predicted for, or predicted. You just could never have done it. It just is what it is. So then your defense mechanisms, your way of kind of reconciling that will be shaken, like the foundations of how you address dealing with emotions. The foundations will be shaken. Can't get away from that. What that might do for people who are willing to apply rationality, aka mastering the emotional self, you look at that as a chapter and an opportunity, a foundation to now basically go on to bigger and better things. You understand? And then again, I think when you're really down and you're able to get redemption, that there is more important than being able to just move very smoothly through life, avoiding any form of, shall I say, effectively resistance. You look to take by default the path of least resistance. Okay, so for me, this is the reason why I'm a lot more open-minded when it comes down to the idea of emotions being exhibited by men. But what I do know though is that because of our physiology, if you will, right, a man that is very emotional in the moment is potentially more destructive than, of course, a woman who obviously does not have the same kind of physiology. Okay, so for me, I think people should look beyond obsessiveness when it comes down to the word emotion. I'll also say to men as well, not to dismiss views of women when it comes to manhood. There's certainly a lot that we can learn from what is said and sometimes what's unsaid. Okay, but I will say this much: when it's all said and done, you as the guy has to stand on your square. And when I say standing on your square, it doesn't mean you're not gonna have your setbacks and stuff. But when it's said and done, if your conviction serves you that you need to listen to your voice and work with something that might not be popular universally with people, and certainly not with women, do it. Especially if you know in your mind you're doing the right thing. Do it, do it, do it. Okay? What I was gonna say is, because of the lack of rite of passage for men, or rites of passage for men, there are proxies that us men, to different degrees, will seek out. One of the most common is obviously women, female validation, sexual female validation, of course. And this is what leads some men down unfortunate paths, like being, forever a side man, and the numerous chronicles that come with that, or dirty macking and doing all kinds of stuff that is which so for me, this is why not only not having complacency but also self-awareness is particularly important. And it's not so much a case of self-awareness so that people can pat you on the back. It's just for your own ability to maximize the benefits of life and navigate it as effectively as you can as a man growing up in 2024 and beyond in the Western world with all its dynamic changes to boot. Okay. My issue is me. Look, I like women, or I like nyash be that. I'm not even going to pretend. That being said, there's levels to it. Many people who know me, I've had these ambitions to achieve certain things dating back to my childhood, and I can't comprehend jettison all of that in the aimless, mindless pursuit of women giving me a pat on the back, a doggy biscuit. God forbid. Let things flow naturally. And to any man that this may resonate with, trust me, we're on the right path. I definitely am convicted about that. I don't want to over embellish this, but I just want to use one example that really kind of resonated with me, and it's actually from the first chapter of that book, The Laws of Human Nature, where it looks at the Athenians, and it looks at the Athenian leader Pericles, and that he was aware of the ways of doing things before, which was quite volatile, inclined to warfare, and so he was able to persuade fellow members of the Senate that it's better, rather than to engage the Spartans, who were their allies and who wanted to wage war on them, in terms of waging war on them or initiating war, you try to aim for the most peaceful and coexisting outcome, the one that is remotely and feasibly possible. And so he was able to maintain a certain level of peace and prosperity within, Athens, and also rather more, not say, I don't know if I can say cordial, but not so warlike and intensive kind of, conflict and tension with the Spartans. Now, he was very popular in his lifetime, but when he passed away, the love that he had attracted among the people quickly turned to hate. And so what now happened, I'm going to just summarize or truncate this. I don't want to go too much, into too much further detail. But what I will say is that in the aftermath of Pericles' death, the Athenians engaged in there was some form of conflict between themselves and the Spartans, right? Now, the Spartans, from what I recognize, or what I remember, they offered some form of truce or some peaceful resolution, right? As opposed to continuing the warring. But there were many emotionally stunted people in Athens that thought it was sensible to try to wage war and just annihilate them, not because they had to, but just because they wanted several pounds of flesh. And as it so happened, this was the thing that led to the fall of that particular polity, what have you. So this just shows how, for men, it's very important for us to maximize our rationality, but to own it. Me personally, I've worked hard trying to manage my emotional self. It's not something I'm going to be complacent with. And I also always will embrace the fact that you're only as good as your last test. And so the last thing I'd want to do is deceive myself. I don't really see the point in doing that, to tell the truth. I think I've largely covered everything I wanted to, but what I will say, lastly, this is the last thing that comes to mind. I probably will do another follow-up in terms of reactions and thoughts and what have you. But one thing I will say is to move away from this obsession with lust. I'm talking about to the guys. I'm even speaking to myself to a certain extent. I'm going to be honest with you. Level set. Maintain your focus. You keep it going. All of that other stuff will fall into place. But I think circumstances wherein you can't really afford to navigate life based on perpetually seeking female validation in the forms of sexual validation, more specifically. God forbid. Can't. No. Not me, mate. Not me. So that's really it, to be honest. I mean, feel free to drop your likes, comments, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, this was an off-the-cuff upload. I'm gonna have something, or some other things rather, in the mental health series coming, following this quite closely. And thank you for listening, and I look forward to the next upload and also to hearing from you. Take care now and have an enjoyable rest of your Saturday.